In the last lesson, we talked about how to group the modes into either a major bucket or a minor bucket. And just as a quick review, modes number 1, 4, and 5 fit in our major bucket, and then modes number 2, 3, and 6 fit in our minor bucket. That's going to come in handy in this lesson because we're going to talk about how do we actually switch modes while we're playing. So previously, we've been playing in modal keys. So for example, let's say we pick the key of B Phrygian. So we'd start on B, Phrygian means pattern 3, so we start playing pattern 3 here. And it gives us a certain type of a feel or a certain type of mood. Remember, the modes are moods. But in reality, the vast majority of the songs that you're going to play with are either going to be in a minor key or a major key. In terms of modes, what we're meaning is the Ionian mode, the major mode, or the natural minor mode, which is called the Aeolian mode, or which is mode number 6, right? So mode number 1 or mode number 6. Those are generally called a major key or a minor key. So since we can group all of our modes into either major or minor, that gives us the ability to change between the modes that match. So if, let's say, modes number 1, 4, and 5 are major, well, if we're playing in any major key, that gives us the ability to switch between mode 1, mode 4, and mode 5 as we're playing. So let me just do an example, and this is going to make a lot more sense as we start using this. So like I mentioned before, the vast majority of songs that you're ever going to play are either going to be in a major key or a minor key. So let's start with the key of A major. In terms of modes, we already know that major means pattern 1 in this case. So Ionian mode. So we're going to play major scale pattern number 1 starting on A, which is our keynote. And again, I can continue, but I'm just showing you where to start. So we would start pattern 1 on A. That would put us in the key of A major. But we know that in order to change a mode, or to play in a particular mode, you start on the keynote and you play the particular pattern of the mode. So let me go through 3 of the major modes starting from the same place. If we wanted to play, of course, in the key of A major, then we start pattern 1 on A. Key of A major, they're referring to the Ionian mode or the first pattern. But what about pattern 4? What about if we wanted to play an A Lydian? Well, pattern number 4 is a major mode. So we can switch between the first mode, which is just, the major scale, or the Ionian mode, or pattern number 4, which is the Lydian mode. They're both major, so they can be interchangeable. And I'll tell you how we decide which one to play in a minute. But for right now, let's just switch to A Lydian. So if I want to play A Lydian, I start on A, and I play pattern 4. Just like that. And of course, again, I can continue playing. But what about pattern number 5? That's our other major mode. Well, I simply start on A, and then I just play pattern 5. It's that simple. As we've already talked about, no matter which pattern you start with, all of the other patterns connect together in the same way that they always have. But that's not really important for right now. I just wanted to mention that in case you're wondering. So let's say we're going to play in the key of A major, and we're actually playing a song. So maybe the chord sounds like this. So normally, most people would think if we're playing in the key of A major, well, the pattern that I should use is pattern number 1, or the mode I should use is the Ionian mode, or mode number 1, right? So they might start improvising and play something like this. So it goes along with that A chord, right? So of course we know at this point that sounds good. So how would we know when we would go to, let's say, the Lydian mode, if we're playing this A chord? Here's a Lydian mode. See, that note sounds a little different. But I want to point something out. When I play the Lydian mode, this note right here, that note is in pattern number 4, or the Lydian pattern. But if I'm playing this A chord, notice how that note right here is not being played. So the simple way to know which mode you should be playing, or which mode you can play, I won't say you should be playing, which mode you should be playing is just up to you. It's up to your, whatever sounds good to your ear. But I'm just pointing something out as a guideline of how to know when to play a certain mode. So notice how, again, this note, I'm not playing it. But in the Lydian pattern, whoops, there, that's the Lydian pattern, pattern number 4. This note is played. So if somebody else is playing an A major chord, and you're playing the Lydian pattern, that note is probably going to sound a little bit out of place because it doesn't match the chord being played. Now, does it work? Yes, of course it works. The Lydian pattern, pattern number 4, matches, let's say, the A major chord in the sense that they're both major, right? We can play any of the major modes in any major key, and we can play any of the minor modes in any minor key. It just is going to come down to when is the right time to play one of the modes or not, and that's what we're talking about here. The general rule is, and this is what we're going to practice in this lesson, the general rule is, does it sound good to you or not? So in this case, we're not going to worry so much about the chords as I just talked about. We're not going to worry so much about which note is being played in a chord. I'm just showing you an example of how we would know, or how we would know how to match a scale to a chord. In this lesson, however, we're simply going to be practicing switching between our modes in a particular key in order to get certain sounds that we want, in order to get the different modal sounds that we can get, okay? So let's back up a minute, go back to our example. Say we're just playing in the key of A major. Let's say the chords go like that. And then we know we can play in one of 3 modes. We can play mode number 1, which is the Ionian mode. We can play in mode number 4, which is the Lydian mode. And we can play in mode number 5, which is the Mixolydian mode. Let's see what those different modes sound like compared to this chord. Or let's say our A major backing track. Here's the major scale, pattern 1. Here's the Lydian scale, pattern number 4. Sounds a little different, right? It still fits, but it kind of sounds odd, and that's the point of a mode. It changes the mood. What about Mixolydian? Here we go. Changed the mood again, didn't it? Okay, so that's how you can switch between your different modes as long as we're playing the modes in the right bucket. For example, if the song that we're playing in is in the A major key, not the key of A major, but any major key, you can switch between your first mode, which is just the major scale. You can switch between mode number 4, which is the Lydian scale or the Lydian mode, and you can switch between mode number 5, which is the Mixolydian mode. And that's what I want you to experiment with in this lesson. Now let's talk about the minor modes, and they work exactly the same way. I just want to show you an example. Just to change where we're starting on the fretboard, let's start on B, for example. So let's say we have a song in the key of B minor. Now we already know that minor means starting on 6. The natural minor scale means mode number 6, which is the Aeolian mode. But we also have 2 other minor modes that we can use. Remember from our last lesson, mode 2, mode 3, and mode 6 are all minor modes. So just like we switched between modes 1, 4, and 5 in a major key, we can also switch between modes 2, 3, and 6 in a minor key. So let's just look at an example of that and the different sounds that we get. So this is a B minor chord. Notice how it already sounds a little more sad or melancholic because it's a minor chord. So I'm going to play a similar rhythm just like we did in the major key example, and then we're going to go through each of the modes just to see the types of sounds or the types of moods that we get. So here is, this is going to be mode number 2, the Dorian mode. Let me play that one more time so you can get the feel of it. So that's mode number 2, the Dorian mode. Now let's play mode number 3, which is the Phrygian mode. And let's see how that feels. Let's see how the mood changes. Totally different, right? Still dark sounding. So it's still dark sounding, it's still minor sounding, right? The overtone is minor. Now let's go to pattern number 6, which is our natural minor scale or the Aeolian mode. So this is pattern number 6. So that one just sounds more straight up minor, just like the minor that we're used to, like a minor, a song in a minor key. We're used to that feel. We're used to that mood because it's a lot more common. The mood of the Dorian mode or the Phrygian mode, or in other words, mode 2 and mode 3, are not as common. So the mood is different. We're not as used to that mood, so it sounds a little off or it sounds a little odd. But either way, what we've just done is we've gone over the different modes that you can play in a major key and how you can switch between those modes. And then we've gone over the different modes you can play in a minor key and how to switch between those modes. Just to reiterate, mode number 1, number 4, and number 5 are our major modes. Mode number 2, number 3, and number 6 are our minor modes. And again, in this lesson, for practice and for the exercises, you're going to be playing in different major and minor keys and switching in between your different major modes and switching between your different minor modes. And that's what we're going to be getting used to in this lesson. Also, the last thing I want to mention is that remember how we started our modes by playing only from the low E string. You can do that in this lesson, but what you can also do is start on any other string that you can find a key note. If you feel comfortable doing that, then I encourage you to do it because that's how you're going to start building fluency with playing all across the neck and playing starting anywhere on the neck from any different string. So go ahead and practice those and really give it a lot of time. There's a lot to practice here. There's a lot to explore here. There's 7 full modes to practice in with this lesson, even though you're only practicing in 2 different keys, let's say a major key or a minor key. So I explore you to play in different major keys and different minor keys and change all of your major and minor modes within those keys, okay? Really spend some time on this and give it all you got and then meet me in the next lesson.